BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200K. When the game's over, head over to our online casino for blackjack, poker, or one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here.
What's up, Tiger fans? Welcome to another episode of Tiger Talk TV. I am the Corey C. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single upcoming episode and turn on that notification bell. You can find us on the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to follow the show and tell every Tiger that you know. And remember, when you support Tiger Talk TV, it all helps the cause, which is the I love Jackson State University. All right, and today I'm joined by a special guest. He's a familiar face and a familiar voice. You can catch him doing play-by-play and color commentary for the SWAC on the ESPN family of networks, among a number of other things, great things at that. The one and only Butch Alsandor. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Corey. Glad to be here, man.
Hey, we appreciate you as always. This is becoming an annual thing for us, at least when these two teams square off. So thank you for always taking the time to grace us on little old Tiger Talk TV.
Well, I appreciate it, man. And it is a big game, and I'm actually looking forward to doing the broadcast with Jorge Vargas this weekend because it's actually the first home game for TSU and Jackson State. After last week's game, they would like to come in here and get a big win too. So it's setting up to be quite the showdown.
Absolutely, and we want to dive all off into it. But first, just kind of give us an update on Butch Alsandor. How has the season been for you? What games have you called and things like that?
It's been good. It's been good. I've actually had a chance to see more than anybody else. I've seen Southern and Prairie View. And, of course, I did the Labor Day Classic, which is the big shootout between Texas Southern and Prairie View A&M. And it's been an interesting season so far. And some things I thought would happen and some things I didn't think would happen. I mean, you look at where Prairie View is right now, especially in conference play, they're 0-2. And I don't know if I saw that coming because they played well enough to win the Labor Day Classic. You know, they played well enough to win last week against Southern. We did that game. And you know, sometimes the difference between winning and losing is that small. And that's what's going on with Bubba McDowell's team. But I have no doubt he will get that straight. He will get them straightened out. And you know, they're going to run off some wins at some point.
Well, that's why they call it the Wild Wild West. It's like that every single year. We just sit back and kind of watch. In the East, you typically have a team or two who you can almost pencil in. It'd be at the top. But in the West, I mean, 1 through 4, 5, you just never know.
And Southern had lost the week before to Jackson State. And then they come in and, you think, okay, maybe Prairie View is going to roll. They led 14-3 at the half. And I'd love to know what Coach Terrence Graves told his team at halftime, because they came out like, the energy was up, the intensity was up, and they were just a different ball club in the second half of that ball game.
Absolutely. Well, we want to talk about, obviously, this TSU team, Texas Southern, 1-2 on the season. Our Coach Dishman, he talked about the 3 different emotions that this team has gone through already. The feeling of getting a win versus Prairie View, getting blown out by Rice, and then giving one away against Lamar. So we'll take a deep dive into this ball club throughout the show, but start us off with just your quick thoughts on the team early on.
Well, to talk about Texas Southern this year, you have to start with talking about their new coach, Chris Dishman. And I just got to give you, full disclosure. I mean, I've known Chris for many, many years. I mean, since he was a defensive back for the Houston Oilers.
Right, okay, the Houston connection, yeah.
Yeah, and to let it all out, at that time when he was playing, the TV station that I worked with actually had the Buddy Ryan show, the Warren Moon show, and the Jack Pardee show. So I got to fly on the charter for a couple of years with the team. So I got to know Chris pretty well.
Wow.
Just like Bubba. Bubba was on the team then too, the head coach at Prairie View.
Okay.
So this is Chris's
Wow.
first head coach, but he's been planning for this. And you look at Chris's background and you think, oh, wow, he got this shot that it was kind of, it's not like anything was handed to him. I mean, he's done the hard work. I mean, he's paid his dues. He's been an assistant forever. He's worked on the professional level. He's worked on the college level. I mean, he's worked everywhere. He's worked in some of the new league, the XFL, some of these other leagues. I mean, he's done it all. So to get this shot, he's really worked for it to get himself here, and he's trying to bring in his philosophy. And he has an interesting philosophy about that. And he said, it's not even like I consider anybody a set starter on this team. He said, I
Yeah.
literally tell my team, whoever has the whoever has the best week of practice, that's the guy that's going to play. And he said, I've been trying to live by that. And all you got to do is look to their game last week against Lamar. And they had a running back, and I got to look at his name because I can't even remember his name because he hadn't been in any of the other games.
Mm-hmm.
But his name is Quintel Quinn, and he rushed for 159 yards, 149 yards against Lamar. And that's a guy who hadn't played in the first couple of games. And here he is coming in, had a good week of practice, got excited, got there, and performed extremely well. So that just tells you a little bit about Chris. That's his philosophy. If you come out here, practice hard, you do well, you're going to get a chance to show what you can do in the game. And I think that relates to players. Because as a player, if you know you're going to have a chance to play, if you just get out here and sell out during practice, that's all players want, is to be treated fairly and to be given an opportunity. And it seems like that's what his philosophy is all about. It's giving these guys an opportunity to show him what they can do.
And then going back to Dishman's playing days, I would imagine it's pretty difficult to predict back then that a player would go on to get into coaching. But is that something that you expected for him? Were you surprised when he got into coaching?
I was kind of surprised about Bubba McDowell at Prairie View. No, I always thought Bubba might be a coach, but I didn't think Chris had that kind of interest. But if you look at his resume, man, he has done the work to get to this point. I mean, like I said, he's coached everywhere. He said, I can't even tell you how many jobs. There's more than 12, 13 jobs as an assistant in different places. So he's done what's necessary. And if you look at their team, and I go back to the Labor Day Classic, because that was the opening of the year, and that was his first game as a head coach. And I think you can look out and see how that team performed in that game. And they came out and they were ready to play and they were hungry. And it was, a hostile environment because the Labor Day Classic always is, no matter which campus you play it on. And they came out, they were ready to play. And it was really quite the introduction for him to the SWAC to come out with a victory. And of course, TSU had lost 9 consecutive games in the Labor Day Classic.
Wow.
9 consecutive games. So, he was not that he was under any pressure, but they needed a win really, really bad. They needed a win for their fan base. They needed a win for the team. They needed to build some confidence, and that's what they got in that game.
Mm-hmm. So, of course, the season opening win against Prairie View, followed by the game at Rice that I'm pretty sure they just want to forget about. But then you move on to game 3, a winnable game versus Lamar, and they kind of talked about, Coach Dishman talked about letting it get away. So take us through that game and what happened.
Yeah, and I spoke to Chris this morning, as a matter of fact. I got a chance to talk to T.C. Taylor earlier this week, but I talked to Chris this morning, and we were talking about the Lamar game. And he goes, no disrespect to Lamar, but he said, we had that game, and we just kind of let it get away. We lost it. They came out with a really good game plan, and if you look at the way that offensive line performed in that game, I mean, all they did was run the ball. They ran the ball over and over and over. And you have to have success on the line. I was looking at Jordan Davis started at quarterback. He had 55 yards passing. 55 yards passing. That's it. And that's because so much success running the ball. And what Chris said was, if it's not broken, we're not going to try to fix it. We're going to let this go. And he just felt that game, again, like he told me this morning, he said, I'm not trying to disrespect Lamar or anything like that, but he said, we have got to stop some of the key penalties and making some of the silly mistakes that are putting us in a situation that we shouldn't even be in. So, but he loved the way they ran the ball. And if you look at that philosophy, Corey, they came out, that was the game plan. They felt like they could run the ball on Lamar, and they felt like their defense with their front line was good enough to win the ball game. And, if you look at the tape, I mean, I kind of agree with Chris. They that was one that just got away from them because they played well enough to win that game at Lamar. It was at
Right.
Lamar.
On the road. Yeah, and I know they'll be excited to get back home finally, right? But Coach Dishman, of course, the former NFL player, he's a former NFL first team All Pro and a two-time Pro Bowler. So just talk a little bit more about what it's been like since he took over. What has he brought to the table? How has he tried to put his stamp on the program? And what do you think an ideal Chris Dishman team will look like once he gets everything in place?
Well, the first thing that I noticed, like just going to watch them when they were in training camp, just going to check out the team in training camp, is discipline. And he's just got a lot of things that he wants it done a certain way. And in football, I think it has to be like that because you're trying to get so many guys on the same page. If you don't have discipline, you're not going to get there. So he came in with this philosophy that, hey, we're all going to be on the same page. We're all going to march to the same beat. And that's been a big deal for this team. Also, his coaching staff. I was looking at it. He was talking about Stephen Smith, the offensive coordinator. What a job he did. He's the offensive coordinator of the team, but he also handles the offensive line. And that's one of the things Coach Dishman was talking about this morning. He said the way he handled the offensive line this week, talking about the week before the Lamar game, he said he just did a phenomenal job with those guys. He said they had so much confidence going into that game. And as the game progressed, they got even more confidence when they had so much success running the ball. So that's pretty much, you want to ask me, you're talking about what his philosophy is from that standpoint. He'd love to have a great running game, and he'd love to let that defense just take them home. That seems to be the approach. But I think he's been very fair to guys, and that always resonates with players. He's been very truthful to players, and I think that's what you want. And I think that's part of what he wants to do. Because as a new coach coming in, you do have to kind of lay down your philosophy, lay down what you expect from these guys, and it's going to be different. It's always an adjustment period, especially for guys who've been there a while. And like every team in college football today, the portal also plays a big role in it. And they had several good guys come in the portal that are adjusting and to his style of coaching.
He takes over a program that hasn't had a winning season since 2000, not counting the championship season where the wins were vacated. But what are the biggest challenges that he's inherited when he took the reins?
Well, one of the things he said this morning is, like he was talking about, he sets goals for the team. And he said, at this point in the season, we're 3 games in, and all of our goals are still lined up. All of our goals are still achievable. And he meant the first goal is obviously to win the West. Then we want to win the SWAC championship. Then we'd like to go to the bowl. But it's hard to say what he had to, because it's been a lot of change over at Texas Southern. And you could say that for a lot of teams now because of the portal. A lot of teams are doing, changing consistently. But I think that's one of the things he felt like that may be needed. Would you have a different cast of characters coming in, and you're trying to blend all of this together? Some of the guys that were there last year, some of the new guys coming in, and some of the young guys from high school. And that's why discipline was such an important part of what he was trying to do, because that's how you get everybody on the same page and marching to the same drum. But he said one of his big goals were to stop the penalties. Let's stop beating ourselves. Let's get in games, and let's be able to finish off games. I mean, that's the one thing he stressed from training camp all the way to now is, let the other team beat us. Let's not beat ourselves. That's been the big philosophy he's stressing.
But talk about this quarterback situation. Very interesting. There's been some lineup changes, some injuries, and I know 3 guys have played already this season. KJ Cooper started the opening game, but hasn't played since. There's Jace Wilson, the 2023 SWAC Newcomer of the Year and preseason second-team All-SWAC selection, who started against Rice, but he was pulled in the second quarter for Jordan Davis, who started game 3 versus Lamar. So on the outside looking in, it seems like a carousel. Do you know what's the overall health of that room and the current depth chart, or is it just fluid?
Yeah, well, he didn't tell me much this morning. I will say that. He didn't say much at all. But no, you're right. All 3 quarterbacks have played. KJ Cooper, who orchestrated that victory over Prairie View in the Labor Day Classic, he injured his ankle and hasn't played since, but he's been progressing in practice. Last week he threw a couple of balls, and he's getting better and better. Jordan Davis, who you saw last week, Houston area kid, really, really good high school athlete, came on, and he was a good fit for what they were trying to do offensively last week from the standpoint of running the football. And he got in there, and he did a great job of managing the game. and if a coach was talking about this morning, because there were no turnovers while he was in there. And then you got Jace. You got Jace Wilson, who was just, did a tremendous job last year. And then you mentioned he was the preseason all second team SWAC quarterback. So he's got some options, but he keeps a lot of that stuff close to his sleeve there. He's not really trying to give a lot away. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Cooper playing some. And that's just me talking. That's not coach talking. Because he didn't indicate that. But, the whole goal from the time he was injured in the Labor Day Classic was to get him ready for SWAC play. So I wouldn't be surprised. But what he did tell me this morning was that Jace and Davis been very close in practice this week. And they've been taking most of the snaps. And he said he hadn't made a decision yet. So, but that's been his quarterback situation from the opening game. For the opening game in the Labor Day Classic, it was Jace and KJ Cooper, and he really couldn't make a decision. And in fact, we went to the game. I said during the broadcast, I said, "We'll know when you know, folks, when they come out of off the sideline, and we'll see who walks into the huddle." So I'll find out at the same time you guys find out.
Yeah.
And it was KJ Cooper, and it was his first start at TSU, and he did a pretty good job in that game.
Could it be a little bit of a chess match between the two coaches? Because we're in a similar situation with two quarterbacks kind of going back and forth and some injuries as well. And I know you talked to Coach TC recently. You don't have to give it away on the show, but did he at least tell you who started?
No, he didn't. He didn't. He said, Cam McCoy is dealing with some nicks and, some little bumps and bruises and stuff like that. And of course, you got Jacoby and Morgan, who was there last year, who actually went, 3-1 as a starter? Yeah, 3-1 as a starter last year. So he's got kind of the same musical chairs thing going on with his quarterbacks also. And that's a good problem to have. I'm sure a coach would tell you, if you got two guys that are that close and pushing that close for the playing time, I'm sure that you like to have those kind of problems. And then he's got two, but TC also said he got two running backs that are healthy now. Two really good running backs, and J. Martin and Irv Mulligan. So, I think last game was their first game back. So he was happy about getting those two big fellas back. And then he talked a lot about the Travis Terrell, who's really running the ball well. So this is a good matchup. It's a matchup, though, that Jackson State has dominated. I was looking at the overall in the series, and it's like 45. Let me see if I could find it somewhere here. I saw it just a minute ago. I was just going over that stuff. 45 wins for Jackson State, 14 for TSU, and 1. So it's been kind of one-sided, and it's been all JSU lately. So that's something Texas Southern is well aware of, and they're going to be fired up because it's their first game at home. It's actually Dishman's first home game.
Right.
So, I mean, they're very excited about that game to kind of, showcase what they can do in front of their home crowd.
And going back to something that you brought up earlier, Coach Dishman has said that he chooses the starters from week to week based on what a guy does in practice that week, and nobody is a quote-unquote starter for the year. Outside of quarterback, has the lineups been pretty consistent from game to game, or has it been different guys each week?
Yeah, I think outside it has. The wide receiving core has been the same as what started the season off for the Labor Day Classic. You look at the offensive line, they've made one change on the offensive line, but other than that, it's been pretty consistent. And the defense is basically the same defense that started the year, minus Jacob Williams. And I'm not sure what his status is. Of course, he's the all-conference linebacker who's done a sensational job for them. He was injured also in the Labor Day Classic. So he's up in the air as to whether or not he'll return this week also. So that's still to be determined. But other than that, it's the same guys that have been playing since the beginning of the year.
And you talked about the running game. You mentioned the offensive line coach. Texas Southern, the past 2 years, they led the league in rushing, and Manny Ramirez is now at Jackson State. We were happy to get him. And it's apparent that this Texas Southern team hangs its hat on running the ball as usual. They've been controlling the time of possession. That's one thing that I've noticed, by 10 minutes a game. And it seems to be pretty strategic because they normally don't line up over the ball until the play clock is at about 15 seconds, and they don't actually snap the ball until under 5 seconds. So talk about this Texas Southern offense a little bit more specifically, that rushing attack.
Yeah. Well, you touched on an important thing right there. They are number one in the SWAC when it comes to time of possession. I mean, they've had football more than anybody else, and that's particularly because of that running game. When you talk about that running game, you have to talk about the running backs coach over there, and they have a good one. And we were actually talking about him this morning because he's a guy both of us remember, and it's Kimball Anders. And you remember,
yeah.
He's, good running back, great return man, and of course he played at U of H here in Houston. And he said the thing about having Kimball as the running backs coach, he said the guys just gravitate to him. He said, not only do they have that respect for him because he's been in the show, he's been there, he's done that, but he said, even when we're off the field, I'll walk by his office and stuff, and there'll be guys in his office because they're always trying to pick his brain to find out a little tidbit here, a little tidbit, a tip there, something that could change their game. And they want to do it the right way. And they got a guy here in Kimball Anders, a guy who's been to the show, who's done it. And so as a player, why not take advantage of that? Why not get in there and then pick his brain? See if you can get a tip here, a tip there that could make them, the difference in your game and what you're doing. And he said the thing about it, he said the guys just love him. He said, it's one of the best hires I made. He said, I love all my coaches, all my assistant coaches, but he said the way the guys are relating to Kimball and the way he relates to the guys, he said, that it's a beautiful thing to watch. And when you talk about this team trying to run the ball as much as they run the ball and have that time of possession in their, it starts with that running back coach. That's where it all starts, because it starts in the meeting room, and then you take it out to the field, and then eventually you have to go on the, during the game and produce during the game. But he's a great guy to have on the team. Like Dishman says, he just thrilled to have Kimball here and the things that he's doing with that backfield.
And talk about the guys leading that rushing attack. I know you mentioned Quintel Quinn, who kind of burst on the scene recently. He's averaging 5.4 yards a pop. Is he a guy that it seems like can be that bell cow, that every down back for Texas Southern, or is it still probably going to be running back committee, especially considering how much they rush the football?
Well, that depends on Quintel. If he practices like he did last week, then he'll be playing. If he doesn't, according to Coach Dishman, then he probably won't be. And that he really has stuck to that. They started Davion Ford in the first game against Prairie View, and he never really got going. He was the guy with the experience from last year, and the couple of times he touched the ball, he just didn't I don't know if it was a situation where the opportunities weren't there or he didn't get enough, but he really never got anything going. And they brought in Danny Green, the freshman, as just a change of pace back. And that guy was so impressive in that game. He had a burst. I mean, it was his quickness. He had first step and cut. And, man, he came in and he had a touchdown against Prairie View. I mean, he just, so it is kind of a running back by committee. And if you look at Sean Xavier Lewis, the great return man, the all SWAC return man, he's playing some running back this year. He had 2 touchdowns last week against Lamar. So it is kind of that backfield by committee that they've always had. So they got speed guys, they got power guys, and you could see as many as 4, maybe 5 people in the backfield on Saturday.
And with that kind of a game of musical chairs at quarterback, who are some guys who will probably need to step up in that wide receiver room to kind of help out those quarterbacks and take a load off the running back room as well?
Well, A.J. Bennett, number 4, is one of the leaders on that with the wide receivers. And, of course, they have coming back Trenton Leary, also number 12. Trenton Leary is always, he played extremely well last year. Jaron Johnson, the tight end, is another good receiver. So they have guys, Kieran Charlo, another wide receiver who's made some plays for them this year. They have some wide receivers who are capable of getting the job done. And they just, last game, they just didn't feel the need to throw it. It just wasn't there that much, because when you're running the ball, because the 2 things happen when you have so much success with the running game. You're picking up first downs and you're moving the ball and you're putting yourself in position to score points, but you're also keeping the ball away from your opponent and you're shortening the game. And by shortening the game, you give them less opportunities to score. So it's kind of a philosophical thing that you come in there about. If you can have more opportunities to score and take advantage of your opportunities, and at the same time roll that clock and not allow your opponent to get because we were talking about how Davis didn't turn it over. So basically he didn't give Lamar an extra opportunity to score. So with this ball control offense, if you continue to roll the clock, you are definitely taking opportunities away from them.
And moving over to the other side of the ball on defense, Texas Southern plays some sound defense. I know they had 2 linebackers, a D lineman, and a defensive back as a preseason first and second team all SWAC selection. So talk about what they like to do defensively.
Well, and that's Jacob Williams is the one of the guys you're talking about, the linebacker, and like I said, he's been injured, and I'm not sure whether he's coming back or not. But they had 4 new starters on the defensive front, who different guys who transferred in and who have done a phenomenal job. You know, I throw out the Rice game because that was kind of like they played so well against Texas Southern, and I'm not sure what happened against Rice. But then you look at how they bounced back against Lamar with the game that they should have won. But that front 4 in the Labor Day Classic played a huge part in that victory. I mean, they really stopped Prairie View from getting that running game cranked up. And it kind of made them one-dimensional, and that made it a lot better for Texas Southern when taking away the running game like that. So, and I'm sure that's what they're going to try to do. They're counting on those guys to continue to be big and strong and physical up front. And try to, that's number one for them, is to shut down the other team's running attack. That's the number one thing they want to do. And of course, it's the same thing at Jackson State. If you think about it, Coach Quinn, the defensive coordinator there, he told me this week when we visited, he goes, they've been like number 1 in the conference in shutting down the run. I mean, they've been very successful shutting down the run. And that's where they like to start, is to take away the other team's running games. And once you do that, you adjust. You make adjustments as you go on throughout the game.
You mentioned Jacob Williams a couple times. He's been injured and his status is up in the air, but he's a preseason first team all SWAC selection, and they had a big 2023, 106 tackles, 18 and a half tackles for loss. So that he's a big part of what they were trying to do this year, and that's a lot of production to make up for. So you talked about the defensive line stepping up. Are there any guys in particular, whether it be on that line in the linebacker room or even in the secondary, who have stepped up or need to step up to kind of make up for that lost production and get Texas Southern kind of over the hump defensively?
Well, Isaiah Bogarty has been playing really well at linebacker. He's been one of the guys that's stepping up. And if you look at that secondary, Canary Simmons, he's a hard hitter, good tackler in the open field. I mean, you could go. Xavier Player is actually playing better now, getting more playing time. I mean, there's a lot of these guys that has been out there on the field getting it done. Javius Williams has come in and made some big plays for this guy. So they have some talented players back there. And I would say just from the 2 times that I saw him, the game that I did against Prairie View and then watching them on tape against Lamar, the biggest thing they are doing now is they're eliminating the big plays. If you look at the Southern team last year, they gave up too many big plays. They gave up way too many big plays. The quick strikes, you get a score and then you let somebody come back and they get a score in 3 plays. I mean, that's not happening right now. And if you make people kind of have to march the ball methodically down the field, again, you're taking off time off of that clock. You're taking away opportunities. And I think that's the thing. The defense is still a work in progress. They're still working at it because, like a lot of teams, even though it's early in the year, a lot of teams are having to overcome injuries, and they're doing the same thing. You got a lot of bumps and bruises. Guys are just, trying to get out there and be as healthy as possible. But at this point, they're looking at the open SWAC play with Prairie View. But that's a different kind of game. It is a SWAC game, but that's more of a rivalry game. Right. They're looking at this Jackson State game like, okay, now we're getting ready for conference. Now we're ready to chase our goals. It starts this weekend.
So I know you've been watching Jackson State over the course of the week, watching film to prep for the game. So what has stood out, good or bad, about this Jackson State team? And as you talk to the staff as well.
Yeah, I would start with their defense. I mean, they just have a good defense. And let me tell you exactly what it is, because I don't want to give you – I was just looking at all that stuff. I'm getting familiar for the game. But when you look at what they're doing, 23 points allowed per game. That's not a lot of points. They're holding teams basically right at 100 yards rushing. That's number 1 in the SWAC, like we talked about before. So that's going to be – now think about that matchup for a second, Corey.
Yep.
Number 1
got to give.
Against a team that loves to run the football and likes to control, and number 1 in ball control in the SWAC. So that's where my attention is going to be early in the ball game. That's the first matchup to see how the offensive line works against the defensive line of Jackson State. You got that number one rush defense against a team that's number one in ball control. That's a whale of a matchup right there. To see who wins that matchup probably is going to go a long way. But we talk about the Jackson State line guys like Phillip Webb, True Thompson, Jeremiah Williams. All those guys have been playing phenomenal. Reed Pulliam at linebacker. Coach talked about him. They're very pleased with that defensive team. I think they would like to see more consistency on offense, if at all possible. And you may start to see some of that, though, with Irv Mulligan and J.D. Martin coming back. J.D. Martin's been around for a while. I mean,
he's been
since
Coach Prime's year one.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. He's a smart guy, got good hands, smooth runner, whereas Mulligan might, can run you over there. I mean, Martin is smooth, man. He'll put that little move on, that little shake and bake on you. And so, they have the skilled athletes too. Now, I will say this. Jackson State is trying to overcome some injuries in the wide receiver core this week. They got 3 wide receivers out this week, or guys who are normally in the mix. So I don't know. Coach didn't indicate one way or another. I don't know, but you would think with that kind of situation, they may try to lean more on the running game. It's hard to say, but that's a big thing when you got 3 of your wide receivers that you count on not able to go. But you got 2 quarterbacks. McCoy is a really good running quarterback there, and Jacobian can spin it a little bit. So they'll be trying to find the right combinations, just like Texas Southern is doing almost to this game. But needless to say, it's a big game for both of them. I mean, I told Coach I hadn't finished watching the Jackson State Grambling tape yet, and he's like, "Don't." He said, "Don't."
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah. He said, "Don't."
You've seen enough. You've seen enough. You'll see a different. That what you saw on Saturday, or what you've seen so far on film. You won't see that this Saturday when you're called. Hopefully, you won't see that. So I don't know who that team was, but
well, talking to these 2 coaches, I mean, it's such a pleasure. TC will tell it like it is. I mean, he'll tell it straight to you like it is, and Dishman is a little more guarded, but they both have similar approaches to the game, and they're both just well-respected coaches, not only amongst their teams, but amongst their peers also.
Yeah, you mentioned Jackson State having several wide receivers out this week. Two of them were starters at the beginning of the season, going into the season, and then even the starting tight end, who was probably penciled in to be the starting tight end, Jency Riley, he hasn't played this year as well, so definitely down, and I'm pretty sure they'll lean on that running game even more. Give us a little bit more insight on your conversation with Coach TC, what you can share, just what's his demeanor, what's his mindset heading into this game.
Well, he was upbeat. He was very upbeat and very excited because, he realizes, they still have some things in front of them too. I mean, it's not like the season is over. Like you said, the SWAC is a wild league. All you have to do is get that victory, and then you're on your way. You get the momentum and you get the victory. And so he was very excited about this game. He thought that they would do some things well offensively. And, he knows TSU. Well, what he told me was TSU is going to be a challenge. He said, they got some good athletes. And he said, I'm not expecting an easy time with this at all. You feel like it's going to be a challenge. And that's kind of the same thing Coach Dishman said on the other side. He said, you look at Jackson State's game against Grambling, and he said, we know what this team is. We know how good this team is. There's no way we're going to take them for granted. So I think both coaches kind of subscribe to the same thing. They know how much talent is on both teams. So they know, looking at the last week, you're not going to put much credit into that.
Yeah, despite Jackson State's dominance over this team traditionally, over this program traditionally, Texas Southern's last win over Jackson State being way back in 2000, I don't think it was coach speak with Coach TC saying that this is a team that they can't take lightly. Even the Jackson State fans, who are usually a pretty confident bunch, they're not taking this game lightly, as well as the players. What would you say are some keys to victory Saturday for each team?
Well, we touched on one just a minute ago. That's going to be how well that defensive line from Jackson State does against that offensive line from Texas Southern. That's going to be a key thing to watch, because if Texas Southern has any success at all running the ball, they're not. I would expect them that they're going to continue to run the ball because that's what they do. The other thing I think is going to be about pressure, whether or not Texas Southern can put some pressure on a guy like Jacobian Morgan when he's trying to pass the football. Can they keep McCoy in the pocket? Those are big things that's going to, because McCoy's the kind of guy, he'll go back to pass on 3rd and 7, and you drop back into your coverage, and he's going to take off. As soon as he sees the hole, he's going to take off. So how does Texas Southern respond to that? That's the thing about it. How does, Jackson State, can they do a better job on stopping that running game than what happened last week? Because, Texas Southern had a lot of success against Lamar. So it'll be real interesting. But I think, as always, when these two teams play, it's going to come down to turnovers. A couple of years ago, Jackson State was so good at forcing turnovers and taking the ball away from other teams. And I think they would like to get back to that some, because when you make those extra opportunities for your team, it just increases your chance to win, tenfold. I mean, you have more of an opportunity to win. But I do want to say this, Corey, because I know we're getting down close to the end here. I got to say this about the Jackson State fans. They are fantastic on X, man. I engage with these guys all the time. Anytime they know that I'm doing one of their games, I mean, they have a great following, a social media following, and they really engage well. And I enjoy it. I enjoy talking, and I'm always impressed with their football knowledge. Not only are they a fan of the team, but they know the details. They have the football knowledge. And so, guys, keep hitting me up on X. I appreciate it. I love the engagement. I love to keep it going. So I just wanted to give them a shout out while we had the opportunity.
That's awesome. We appreciate that. And I know they will love and enjoy hearing that from you. And speaking of the fan base, I expect the Jackson State fans to show up, not only getting on the road, but if you look at the alumni base in Houston, that's one of our top markets. So we expect a big crowd. What about on the Texas Southern side? New coach, first game, Jackson State coming to town. I think that's the trifecta that should generate a big crowd.
Well, you would think so. I mean, I would really think so. Astros playoffs don't get started until next week. So I would think so. I would think that, and Chris Dishman mentioned that. He goes, we're doing our best to try to pump it up on this end because we know Jackson State's going to have a big crowd. And so, and I think it's just going to be the anticipation, because the first game was at Prairie View, it was a big crowd there, a lot of TSU fans there. I'm not telling you, they had their sides pretty full. That was a full stadium for that game. But then the Rice game, was iffy, kind of like you go down to Lamar, not a lot of this is their first chance at home. So I think you're going to see the TSU faithful come out and support their team. And, what was basically the home opener for them.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to it. Of course, a 6 p.m. kickoff. The weather looks great. But if you can't make the trip, this game will air on ESPN Plus. Butch, let us know who will be on the call.
Yes, I'll be myself and Jorge Vargas. And, we always have a lot of fun with the game. Jorge is a good football guy, and he really kind of gets into the SWAC football specifically. So, I was teasing him last week because it was Western night over at Prairie View a couple of weekends back. And he showed up with his Western wear. Of course, he got in his coat. Came with this Western wear on. He wanted to be a part of the crowd. So that's the kind of guy he is. He gets into it a little bit. So, but it'll be fun. I mean, I've done a lot of Jackson State games over the last several years, and they've been a tremendous team. Texas Southern's been trying to find themselves, and they're starting over, and they have a lot of confidence. And this game is a big game for both teams for different reasons, but it's a big game. Jackson State would love to just get that conference win here against Texas Southern. And Texas Southern, they're basically trying to change the culture. They're trying to change some minds, and they're trying to, get confidence and move on from there. So you're going to see both teams with a lot on the line this week.
Yeah, definitely a lot on the line. Texas Southern, with having a first-year head coach, it'd be great for them to start out 2-0 in conference play. And then Jackson State, although they've played 2 SWAC opponents, they haven't had a game that counted in the standings. So this is technically the first SWAC game, so they want to get off to a 1-0 start. So we're looking forward to it. We appreciate you for everything that you do. We definitely enjoy having you on the call. And once again, we thank you for this annual conversation.
Thank you, Corey. Glad to do it, man. Anytime.
Okay. All right. We'll see you on Saturday.
All right, man. You take care.
All right.
Tiger Talk TV is presented by BetOnline.